I found the text message by accident. Not on Matthew's phone, I would never violate his privacy like that, but on the shared tablet we used for business expenses. He'd logged into his personal messages without realizing, and when I picked it up to check our supplier invoices, there it was. Catherine knows about the Portland expansion. Don't worry, I handled it. From my husband to my sister. Catherine. My sister Catherine, who lived 3 hours away in Olympia and had nothing to do with Thompson and Associates, the commercial real estate firm Matthew and I had built over 12 years of marriage. Catherine, who asked polite questions about how work was going over holiday dinners, but whose eyes glazed over when I tried to explain cap rates or zoning variances. Catherine, who worked for a nonprofit and lived in a modest apartment and had never expressed any interest in commercial property investment. I stared at the message for a full minute, standing in our kitchen with morning light coming through the windows Matthew had insisted we expand during the renovation. The renovation I'd managed while he focused on growth opportunities. The renovation that had come in under budget because I'd personally negotiated with every contractor, reviewed every invoice, caught every attempt to pad hours or substitute inferior materials. Catherine knows about the Portland expansion. We didn't have a Portland expansion. We'd discussed Portland as a potential market 6 months ago, but the preliminary numbers hadn't justified the risk. The median property values were higher than Seattle, the competition more established, the regulatory environment more complex. Matthew had agreed with my analysis. We'd shelved it together, decided to focus on consolidating our existing properties in Seattle and Tacoma, strengthening our foundation before considering geographic expansion. Or I thought we'd shelved it together. I scrolled up through the message thread, my thumb moving mechanically across the screen. It went back months. Short, efficient exchanges about timing, about LLC structures, about keeping things quiet until the framework is solid, about someone named Philip who was coming through with the financing. Philip, Matthew's college roommate, the one who'd moved to Portland 5 years ago and started some kind of investment fund. I'd met him twice, maybe 3 times. Once at our wedding, once at a college reunion Matthew had dragged me to, once when Philip had visited Seattle for a conference. Pleasant enough. Confident in the way people who manage other people's money tend to be confident. I hadn't thought about him in years. My hands were shaking. I set the tablet down carefully on the granite countertop. The granite I'd chosen after visiting 4 different showrooms, comparing prices, negotiating a bulk discount because we were also renovating the bathrooms, and made myself breathe. In through the nose, out through the mouth, the breathing. Technique I'd learned from the yoga classes I'd stopped attending 2 years ago because I'd been too busy managing the Ramirez acquisition. There had to be an explanation. Matthew wouldn't start a business venture without telling me. We were partners, equal partners. 50-50 ownership. Both our names on everything, every major decision made together. That was the agreement we'd made when we started Thompson and Associates 9 years ago, shortly after we got married. We'd sat at the same kitchen table before the renovation when the counters were still the builder-grade laminate, and talked about how we'd structure our business and our marriage as true partnerships. "We're in this together," Matthew had said, holding my hand across the table. "Everything equal, everything shared, no secrets." I'd believed him. I picked up the tablet again and screenshot the message thread. My hands had steadied. I worked through the process methodically. Screenshot, check that it saved properly. Scroll down, screenshot again. 17 screenshots total. Then I opened the tablet settings and deleted the screenshots from the recently deleted folder, backed them up to a private cloud account Matthew didn't know existed. I'd set it up years ago for personal photos I didn't want on our shared family account, and cleared the tablet's message history to exactly where it had been when I'd picked it up. The whole process took maybe 5 minutes. I moved through it with the same focused efficiency I brought to lease negotiations or tenant disputes. Problem identified, evidence secured, next steps to be determined. My hands had stopped shaking. They felt very cold and very steady. Matthew came downstairs 20 minutes later, already dressed for the office in the navy suit I'd picked up from the dry cleaner on Tuesday. He moved through the kitchen with the easy confidence of someone who lived here, who belonged here, who had nothing to hide. He kissed my cheek, a brief, habitual press of lips against skin, poured coffee into the travel mug I'd given him last Christmas, checked his phone. "Morning meeting with the Ramirez project team," he said, scrolling through his email. "Probably run until 11. You need me for anything today?" The Ramirez project, the strip mall conversion in Tacoma we'd acquired 8 months ago. I'd sourced the deal, run the initial analysis, presented it to our board, which consisted of the two of us and our attorney, Jason Wright. I'd identified the opportunity when I'd noticed the property listing had been sitting stale for 3 months, suggesting seller motivation. I'd researched the neighborhood demographics, the traffic patterns, the anchor tenant possibilities. I'd built the financial model that showed how we could convert the struggling strip mall into a mixed-use development with residential units above retail, taking advantage of Tacoma's loosening zoning regulations. Matthew had focused on the financing structure, his particular expertise. He'd negotiated our construction loan terms, structured the ownership LLC to optimize our tax position, coordinated with our lender on the draw schedule. Except now I wondered if he'd actually focused on it or if he'd been distracted by Portland and Philip and whatever they were building without me. "Nothing urgent," I said. My voice came out normal, steady. "I'll be in the office this afternoon. Need to review the Park Avenue leases." He nodded, still scrolling. "Catherine called last night while you were in the shower. Said she wants to visit next month, spend a long weekend. I told her we'd love that." My sister's name in his mouth felt like glass, sharp-edged, cutting. "That sounds nice," I said. He looked up from his phone, then really looked at me. "You okay? You seem distracted." "Just thinking about the Park Avenue renewals," I lied. "The Rodriguez lease is up in 60 days, and they're asking for tenant improvements I'm not sure we can justify." "Let them walk if they won't renew at market rate," Matthew said. He said this kind of thing often, decisive, strategic advice delivered with confidence. The kind of advice that sounded good, but that ignored the practical reality of vacancy costs, leasing commissions, tenant improvement allowances for new tenants. The kind of advice that worked well in theory, but that I had to manage in practice. "I'll handle it," I said. "I know you will." He smiled, kissed my cheek again, and headed for the door. "Love you." "Love you too," I said automatically. The door closed. His car started. The garage door opened and closed. The house settled into silence. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, looking at the space we'd built together. The open floor plan that maximized natural light. The professional-grade appliances I'd researched for 3 weeks, reading reviews, comparing energy efficiency ratings, calculating life cycle costs. The breakfast nook where we ate together most mornings, discussing property values and market trends and 5-year plans. The window over the sink looked out onto our backyard. We'd landscaped it 2 years ago. I'd wanted low-maintenance native plants. Matthew had wanted a lawn. We'd compromised, a small lawn area surrounded by native plant beds. I'd done all the planting myself, spending weekends with my hands in the dirt, while Matthew had been networking at industry conferences. The lawn was looking patchy now. It needed reseeding, another task for the list. I pulled out my phone and opened my notes app. Started a new note titled Portland. Then I stopped, deleted it. Started again with a note titled Park Avenue Renewals. Under that innocuous heading, I wrote, "Text messages between Matthew and Catherine about Portland expansion." Portland expansion was supposedly shelved 6 months ago. Reference to Philip Clark and financing. Reference to LLC structures Matthew told Catherine to keep quiet. Why would Catherine need to know about business plans? Why would Matthew tell her not to mention it to me? I stared at the list. Added one more item. Check business accounts for unusual withdrawals. Then I went upstairs to our home office. Matthew's desk on one side, mine on the other. both of us working in comfortable silence most evenings, and I opened our business banking records. I was the primary account holder on all Thompson & Associates accounts. Matthew had been added as a co-signer 3 months after we launched, once the business had stabilized and we'd established sufficient revenue to justify bringing him on formally. Another thing I'd set up in those early days when I was doing everything: marketing, bookkeeping, property management, lease negotiations, permit applications, contractor coordination, tenant communications. Matthew had joined the business after it was already running. He'd been working in commercial lending at the time, and his expertise had been valuable for structuring our financing. But the foundation, the licenses, the initial properties, the client relationships, the systems and processes, that had all been me. The records went back 9 years. I started from the most recent and worked backward, reviewing every transaction with the focused attention I usually reserved for due diligence on property acquisitions. At first, I found nothing unusual. Our operating account showed the expected pattern: rent deposits from our tenants, vendor payments for maintenance and utilities, property tax disbursements, insurance premiums, my salary, and Matthew's salary. Equal amounts transferred bi-weekly to our personal joint account. Our reserve account held 6 months of operating capital, exactly as our business plan specified. Our equity line of credit remained untapped except for the Ramirez acquisition, where we'd drawn $200,000 for the down payment and immediately begun paying it down according to schedule. Everything looked normal, proper, the kind of clean financial records that would satisfy any auditor or lender. Then I looked at Matthew's personal credit card, the one linked to our business account for his work expenses: travel, client dinners, professional development, industry conferences. We both had these cards. We both submitted expense reports monthly. I reviewed and approved his. He reviewed and approved mine. Another partnership equality measure. I pulled up 6 months of statements, 3 charges to Portland area hotels over the past 4 months, each during weeks when Matthew had told me he was visiting potential properties in eastern Washington. Spokane specifically, where we'd briefly considered expanding before deciding the market was too volatile, or meeting with investors in Vancouver, British Columbia, where one of our lenders was headquartered. 7 charges to a Portland law firm, Miller & Associates, amounts ranging from $500 to $2,000. The description said, legal consultation. Why would Matthew need legal consultation from a Portland firm? We had Jason right. Jason handled all our legal work: formation documents, lease reviews, purchase agreements, regulatory compliance. Jason had been with us since the beginning. 12 charges to restaurants in Portland. Not romantic restaurants. I checked each one online. Business lunch places. The kind of upscale casual establishments where professionals met to discuss deals over salads and craft beer. Each charge was for 2 people, based on the amounts. Matthew and someone else. Matthew and Philip, probably. This wasn't an affair. This was something else. I opened a new spreadsheet and started documenting everything: date, location, amount, category. I worked methodically, the same way I approached property analysis. Gather data, identify patterns, draw conclusions. Pattern. Matthew had been traveling to Portland regularly for 4 months. Pattern. Matthew had been using our business credit card to pay for Portland travel and legal services. Pattern. Matthew had been lying to me about where he was going and what he was doing. Conclusion. Matthew was building something in Portland, something that required lawyers and regular in-person meetings, something he didn't want me to know about. I pulled up our business formation documents, Thompson & Associates, LLC, registered in Washington State 9 years ago. Members, Julia Thompson, M.E., and Matthew Thompson, him having taken my maiden name professionally for the business. Ownership, 50-50. Management structure, member managed, both members authorized to bind the company. I read through the operating agreement carefully. Section 5.2. No member shall engage in any business activity that competes with or conflicts with the business of the company without the prior written consent of all members. Non-compete clause, standard language. We'd included it at Jason's recommendation back when we were just setting things up and everything felt theoretical and safe. Then I searched the Washington Secretary of State Business Registry for any entities connected to Matthew's name. Nothing under Thompson and Associates and Matthew's name as registered agent. Nothing under just Matthew's name. I tried different search parameters, different spellings, different entity types. Nothing. I sat back in my office chair, the ergonomic one I'd bought after my back started hurting from too many hours hunched over property analyses, and thought about what that meant. If Matthew was building a business in Portland, he wasn't stupid enough to register it in Washington where I could easily find it. I opened my laptop and navigated to the Oregon Secretary of State's Business Registry. Searched for entities registered to Matthew Thompson. There it was, Pacific Northwest Property Group, LLC, registered in Oregon 4 months ago. Formation date, September 15th. Members listed, Matthew Thompson and Philip Clark. Ownership structure, 60% Matthew, 40% Philip. Registered agent, Miller and Associates. Registered address, 425 Southwest Morrison Street, Portland, Oregon. I recognize the building from industry publications. Premium downtown office space, Class A commercial. Not a virtual office or mail forwarding service. Real space, expensive space. I clicked through to the formation documents, which were publicly available. Articles of organization, operating agreement summary, initial member contributions, $300,000, total capital, $180,000 from Matthew Thompson, $120,000 from Philip Clark, $180,000. Where had Matthew gotten $180,000? I opened our personal bank accounts. We had 3, joint checking, joint savings, and a small emergency fund and a money market account. The checking account was for monthly expenses, mortgage, utilities, groceries, insurance. Usually maintained a balance around $8,000. The savings account was for larger purchases and long-term goals. We'd been building it steadily over the years, currently at $43,000. Except last year at this time, it had been at $91,000. I pulled up old statements to verify. Yes, $91,000 in January of last year. Now, 13 months later, $43,000. $48,000 withdrawn over the past year. I went through the statements, line by line, found the withdrawals. They were irregular, but consistent. $3,000 here, $5,000 there. Once a larger withdrawal of $8,000 with the memo, personal investment opportunity. Another large one of $7,500 with the memo, equipment purchase. All the withdrawals had been made by Matthew. His signature on the withdrawal slips that the bank had scanned and attached to the digital records. I calculated quickly. The amounts didn't quite add up to $180,000, maybe $48,000 from our joint savings. Where had he gotten the rest? I checked our home equity line of credit. We'd opened it 3 years ago, back when we were considering a major renovation. We'd ultimately done a more modest remodel and hadn't needed to tap the HELOC. It had a $200,000 limit and showed a zero balance. Except when I looked at the transaction history, I found a $95,000 draw from 8 months ago, and then a $95,000 payoff from 6 months ago. He'd borrowed $95,000 against our house, held it for 2 months, then paid it back. But paid it back from where? Not from our joint accounts. Those withdrawals would have been much larger and I would have noticed. I opened Matthew's personal credit card again, the one he used for business expenses, but that was technically in his name only, tied to his personal credit history. Scrolled back further. back to 8 months ago. There, a $95,000 cash advance? Massive. The kind of cash advance that would come with horrific interest rates and fees. And then, 6 months ago, a $95,000 payment plus $7,000 in interest and fees. He'd done a cash advance on his personal credit card to pay off the home equity line before I noticed it, which meant he'd needed the HELOC money for something that took 2 months to convert into a form where he could pay back the HELOC without using our joint funds. I sat very still, working through the mechanics. He'd withdrawn $48,000 from our joint savings over the course of a year. Small enough amounts that I'd been too busy to notice or question. He'd taken a $95,000 draw on our home equity line, immediately done a cash advance on his personal credit card to pay it back. And then what? Paid off the credit card. How? I opened our business accounts again, looked at the distribution schedule. There, 6 months ago. $102,000 owner distribution paid to Matthew Thompson. Authorized by me, according to the digital signature on the authorization form. I didn't remember authorizing that distribution. We didn't do mid-year distributions. We paid ourselves regular salaries and kept everything else in the business for reinvestment. I pulled up the scanned authorization form. My signature was on it, dated 6 months ago. I stared at that signature, at the loops and curves that were supposed to be mine. Then I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a random signed document from the same time period. A lease renewal I'd signed for one of our Park Avenue tenants. The signatures didn't match. Same basic shape, but the details were wrong. The way the J in Julia curled. The angle of the T in Thompson. Someone had forged my signature, someone who had access to documents with my real signature, someone who knew how I signed my name but couldn't quite replicate the muscle memory. Matthew had forged my signature to authorize a $102,000 distribution to himself. He'd used that money to pay off the cash advance on his personal credit card. He'd used the original cash advance to pay back the home equity line he'd drawn against our house. He'd used the home equity money, plus the $48,000 from our joint savings, to fund his $180,000 investment in Pacific Northwest Property Group. He'd stolen $180,000 from me, from us, from our business and our savings and our home equity. And he'd done it systematically, carefully, with enough financial engineering that I hadn't noticed until I'd started looking. The documentation took me 4 days to compile. I worked in the evenings after Matthew went to bed, telling him I was catching up on lease reviews. I worked on weekends while he was visiting properties, though now I knew he was probably in Portland, building Pacific Northwest Property Group with Philip. I didn't confront him. Not yet. Instead, I gathered evidence. I documented every withdrawal from our joint savings account, printed the statements, highlighted the suspicious transactions. I documented the home equity line draw and payoff, the timing, the amounts. I documented the cash advance on his personal credit card and the subsequent payoff from our business distribution. I documented the forged signature on the distribution authorization, made side-by-side comparisons with my real signatures from the same time period. I found the formation documents for Pacific Northwest Property, Group in Matthew's email. He'd left his laptop open one evening, gone to take a shower, and I'd simply sat down at his desk and accessed his personal email account. The password was my birthday backward, 1281. July 12th, 1981. Something I'd guessed on the first try because Matthew had always been sentimental about dates. He used my birthday for everything. His gym locker combination, his luggage locks, his phone passcode, until I'd told him to change it for security reasons. The Pacific Northwest Property Group formation documents were in a folder labeled PDX Project. Very organized, very thorough, hundreds of emails going back 7 months. I started reading from the beginning. The earliest email was from Matthew to Philip, dated June of last year. Subject line, Portland Opportunity. The body was brief. Been thinking about our conversation at the reunion. You still seeing good deals in Portland? Might be time for me to look at expansion. Would be interested in partnering if you're Open to it? Philip's response came the next day. Absolutely. Market's hot right now, but there are still opportunities if you know where to look. I've got some properties I'm analyzing. Let's talk. I clicked through the thread. Watched their plans develop over weeks, then months. July. Ran some preliminary numbers on the Clark Street property. Could work. Would need about $300,000 in initial capital between us. August. Talked to a lawyer here. Miller and Associates, they specialize in real estate entities. Said we should form an Oregon LLC to keep things clean. You good with 60-40 split, given your higher capital contribution? September. LLC is formed. Pacific Northwest Property Group. Has a nice ring to it. Miller's going to handle all the documentation. When can you get down here to look at properties in person? October. Closed on the Clark Street property. $1.2 million purchase price. Got excellent financing terms. Should be able to flip it in 18 months for at least $1.6 million. This is going to work. November. Looking at 2 more properties, one on Division, one in the Pearl District. Both need work, but both in great locations. You should come down and see them. December. Met with another potential investor yesterday. Guy named George Edwards, big portfolio in Seattle, looking to diversify into Portland. I mentioned your Thompson and Associates track record. He's interested in coming in on the Division Street property. January. Edwards is in for $500,000 on the Division property. This is scaling faster than I expected. You should think about bringing Julia in now. We're going to need more operational support soon, and she's got the experience. I stopped at that email, read it 3 times. Philip had suggested bringing me in January, 2 months ago. I scrolled down to Matthew's response. Not ready to bring Julia in yet. She's risk-averse, and she'll want to slow everything down with analysis. I know how she operates. She'll find reasons why every property is wrong. Once we've got more properties closed and we can show her the returns, she'll be easier to convince. For now, let's keep building. Risk-averse. That's what he called my careful analysis, my due diligence, my systematic approach to evaluating opportunities and avoiding disasters. Risk-averse. Philip's response. Your call, but you're going to have to tell her eventually. You're using joint funds, right? She's going to notice. Matthew. I've been careful. Small withdrawals, spread out over time. She's been busy with the Ramirez project, and honestly, she's stopped paying attention to our personal finances. She trusts me to handle that. By the time she notices anything, we'll have enough success to show her that it was worth it. She trusts me to handle that. I sat at Matthew's desk, staring at those words on his laptop screen, and felt something cold and sharp settle into my chest. He was right. I had trusted him. I'd been so focused on managing Thompson and Associates, on handling the operational details, on making sure every property was maintained and every tenant was satisfied and every deadline was met, that I'd stopped checking our personal finances. We'd divided responsibilities. I managed business operations. He managed business development and our personal accounts. It had seemed efficient, practical. It had been stupid. I kept reading. February. Catherine called me yesterday asking what I was working on. She noticed I've been traveling more. I told her we're exploring some expansion opportunities, but keeping it confidential for competitive reasons. She offered to help with research if we need it. She's got good connections in the Portland nonprofit world. Might be useful for community relations down the line. I trust her to keep things quiet for now. My sister, Catherine, who'd noticed Matthew's changed behavior because she actually paid attention to people, unlike me, who'd been too busy managing property leases and vendor contracts too, noticed my husband was systematically lying to me. And Matthew had told Catherine just enough to make her complicit. Not enough to make her truly informed. He hadn't told her Pacific Northwest Property Group existed. Hadn't told her he was using our joint funds without my knowledge. Just enough so that if I asked Catherine whether she knew what Matthew was up to, she would say yes, she knew it was business expansion stuff, and I would assume she knew because I'd told her, or because Matthew and I had told her together, and I would drop the subject. He'd weaponized my relationship with my sister, turned Catherine into an unknowing alibi. I clicked forward through more emails. Found a draft pitch deck titled Pacific Northwest Property Group Investment Opportunity. Opened it. 23 slides, professional design, glossy photos of Portland properties, financial projections showing 25% annual returns, market analysis citing Portland's population growth, job growth, housing shortage. Slide 8, management team. 2 headshots, Matthew Thompson and Philip Clark. Under Matthew's photo, co-founder and managing partner, previously co-founder and managing partner of Thompson and Associates, Seattle-based commercial real estate firm with $15 million in assets under management, 9 years of experience in property acquisition, financing, and development. My firm, our firm. He was using my success, to raise money for his separate venture. The profile didn't mention that Thompson and Associates was still operating. It didn't say co-founder and current managing partner. It said previously, like he'd already moved on, like Thompson and Associates was something in his past. I thought about George Edwards, the Seattle investor who Philip had mentioned. Someone who might know people in Seattle's commercial real estate community. Someone who might eventually start talking to other investors about this exciting new opportunity in Portland with Matthew Thompson, formerly of Thompson and Associates. How long before someone mentioned it to one of our clients? How long before word got back to me through the industry grapevine? Or had Matthew been planning to tell me before that happened? Present me with Pacific Northwest Property Group as an accomplished fact, a successful venture, something I couldn't argue with because it was already making money? I found another email, this one from 3 weeks ago. Matthew to Philip. Been thinking about the Thompson and Associates situation. Julia and I have been growing apart for a while. The business is solid, but it's mostly her management at this point. I'm spending more time on PDX, and it shows. I talked to a lawyer in Seattle about what it would look like to dissolve our partnership. Washington LLC law is pretty straightforward, and if we can't agree on a buyout, the business gets valued and assets get split. Given that she's done most of the operational work and has more sweat equity, she'd probably get a higher percentage, but I've got claims to half the assets at minimum, plus whatever I can argue I contributed. I'm thinking if PDX keeps growing at this rate, I'll be able to offer her a clean buyout in 6 months. Let her keep Thompson and Associates. I'll keep PDX. She gets Seattle, I get Portland. Clean separation. Clean separation. He'd been planning to leave me. Professionally. Probably personally too, based on growing apart. For how long? Since June when he'd first emailed Philip? Earlier? I checked the laptop's browser history, found searches from 5 months ago. Washington State LLC dissolution process. How to dissolve business partnership. Divorce and business ownership, Washington State. Dividing business assets in divorce. 5 months. He'd been planning his exit for at least 5 months. I took photos of everything with my phone. Screen after screen of emails, financial documents, the pitch deck, the search history. I didn't forward anything from his email. That would leave a trail. Just photos. Hundreds of photos, backed up immediately to my private cloud account. Then I carefully cleared the browser history I'd created while I'd been reading through his files, closed all the windows, left his laptop exactly as I'd found it. I heard the shower turn off upstairs. Matthew would be down in 10 minutes, maybe 15. I went to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of wine, stood at the counter looking at my reflection in the dark window over the sink. I looked the same face, same hair pulled back in the same practical ponytail I'd worn for years, because who had time for complicated hairstyles when there were properties to manage? but I felt different, like something fundamental had shifted. Like I'd been walking through my life with blinders on, and someone had just ripped them off, and now I could see everything. All the ways I'd been managing our business and our marriage while Matthew had been planning his exit. She trusts me to handle that risk-averse, clean separation. I thought about the person I'd been 4 days ago before I'd found that text message on the tablet. That person would have confronted Matthew immediately, would have been hurt and confused and demanded explanations, would have tried to fix it, to understand it, to find a way to make it work. That person was gone. The person standing in this kitchen now was someone different, someone colder, someone who understood that you don't confront someone until you have all the evidence, someone who understood that the partnership was already over, had been over for months, and the only question now was who would control the terms of separation. Matthew came downstairs 20 minutes later, hair damp from the shower, wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt. Home casual, comfortable. "Hey," he said, kissing the top of my head as he passed me to get to the refrigerator. "You've been working late. Everything okay?" "Fine," I said. "Just some complicated lease. Just some language I needed to review for the Park Avenue renewals." "You work too hard," he said, pulling out leftovers from last night's dinner. "You should delegate more. That's why we hired that property management assistant." Lauren Davis. We'd hired her 6 months ago to help with administrative tasks. She was good, efficient, reliable. Maybe she could handle more responsibility. "Maybe," I said. Matthew heated his dinner in the microwave. We ate together at the kitchen table, the same table where we'd planned our business 9 years ago. He talked about his day, the Ramirez project meetings, some issues with permits, a conversation he'd had with Jason about corporate structure options. I listened and nodded and made appropriate responses. And I watched him lie to me, not about anything specific, just by omission, just by talking about Thompson and Associates like it was still our shared priority, our joint future, when I now knew he was planning to leave me within 6 months. "You're quiet," he said eventually. "Just tired," I said. "You should take a break, maybe visit Catherine for a weekend." "When's the last time you took time off?" Catherine, my sister, who he'd used as an alibi without her knowledge. "Maybe," I said. "That's a good idea." We finished dinner, cleaned up together, loading the dishwasher with the same comfortable choreography we'd developed over years. Then we went upstairs to our bedroom and got ready for bed, with the same routines. Matthew set his phone on the nightstand. Face down, I noticed, which was new. I'd never paid attention before to whether he put his phone face up or face down. How many things had I not noticed? How many small changes in his behavior had I dismissed because I was too busy, too focused on work, too confident that we were solid? We lay in bed in the dark. Matthew fell asleep quickly the way he always did. I lay awake, listening to his breathing, thinking about what came next. I couldn't keep pretending. I didn't know. The knowledge sat in my chest like a weight, getting heavier every minute I stayed silent. But I also couldn't confront him yet. Not without a plan. Not without knowing what I wanted and what I could realistically get. Matthew was planning a clean separation. My business, his business. Neat, fair seeming. But it wasn't fair. He'd built Pacific Northwest Property Group with money stolen from our business and our joint accounts. Money that should have been ours. Mine to decide how to use. Money he'd taken through fraud and forgery. If he wanted a clean separation, I would give him one. But on my terms, not his. I needed a lawyer. Not Jason. Jason was Thompson and Associates' lawyer, and I wasn't sure whose side he'd be on in a dispute between me and Matthew. Someone new, someone who would work for me alone. I needed a forensic accountant, someone who could document everything Matthew had taken, every forged signature, every fraudulent withdrawal, someone who could present it in a way that would hold up in court if necessary. I needed to protect Thompson and Associates' assets, freeze the accounts, change the passwords. make sure Matthew couldn't take anything else while I was building my case. And I needed to do all of this without him knowing. Because if Matthew realized I'd found out, he'd move faster, withdraw more money, hide assets, make everything more complicated. I had to be smarter than him, more careful, more thorough. For years, I'd been the partner who managed the details while Matthew handled the vision. The reliable one, the boring one. Now I would use those skills against him. The next morning, I called in sick to our Thompson & Associates office. Told Matthew I thought I was coming down with something and should probably stay home and rest. "Want me to stay home with you?" he asked, concern in his voice. The kind of loving husband concern that would have made me feel guilty 4 days ago. "No," I said. "You have that meeting with the Tacoma Planning Commission about the Ramirez permits. I'll be fine. Just need sleep." He kissed my forehead, told me to call if I needed anything. Left for the office. I got dressed, got in my car, and drove to downtown Seattle. Jason Wright's office was in Pioneer Square, in a renovated warehouse building with exposed brick and industrial windows. Thompson & Associates had used Jason for all our legal work since we'd started. He'd incorporated us, reviewed every major contract, handled our property acquisitions, advised us on liability issues and regulatory compliance. He knew our business intimately, which meant he might know about Pacific Northwest Property Group, too. Jason's assistant, a young man named Timothy, who was friendly and efficient, showed me into the conference room instead of Jason's office. The conference room had a large table, a whiteboard, windows overlooking the street. Jason came in a minute later, carrying a yellow legal pad and looking puzzled. "Julia," he said, "I didn't know we had a meeting scheduled. Is everything okay with the Ramirez permits?" "I'm not here about Ramirez," I said. "I need to talk to you about something else." His expression shifted, became more alert. "All right." I sat down at the conference table, folded my hands in front of me. "I need you to tell me about Pacific Northwest Property Group." Jason went very still, the kind of stillness that comes from trying not to react. Then he said carefully, "What about it?" "You know about it." "Yes." "Matthew hired Miller and Associates in Portland to form it. But you knew, didn't you?" A long pause. "Yes." The confirmation hurt, even though I'd expected it. Jason had known. Jason, who I'd trusted, who I'd thought was on our side, on my side, had known about Matthew's secret Portland venture and hadn't told me. "When did he tell you?" I asked. Jason sat down across from me, looked uncomfortable. "He consulted me about 6 months ago. Asked whether forming a separate entity would create any conflicts with your partnership agreement." "And what did you tell him?" "That it wouldn't, provided the new entity didn't directly compete with Thompson & Associates' existing holdings or target markets." "Portland is a target market. We analyzed it together last year." "You analyzed it and decided not to pursue it," Jason said. His voice was gentle, which somehow made it worse. "Matthew asked me specifically about that. Whether opportunities you jointly declined were still restricted. My advice was that they weren't, that once he'd formally decided not to enter a market, he was free to pursue it independently, provided he didn't use Thompson & Associates' resources to do so." "He used our joint savings," I said. My voice came out flat. "Approximately $180,000 from our joint accounts and our home equity. Plus he stole money from Thompson & Associates through fake distributions." Jason's expression changed. "He told me he was using personal savings he'd accumulated separately." "He lied to you?" "Apparently." Jason ran a hand through his hair. He looked genuinely distressed, which was some comfort. "Julia, if I'd known he was using joint funds or company funds, I would have advised him very differently. I would have told him he needed your consent. I would have—" He stopped. "I would have told you." "Would you?" I asked. "Or would you have tried to protect attorney-client privilege?" "You're both my clients," Jason said. "When there's a conflict between co-clients, I have obligations to both of you. But fraud is different. If I'd known Matthew was committing fraud against the business, or against you personally, I would have been obligated to disclose that. "What else did he ask you about?" I said. Jason was quiet for a moment. Then he pulled a file from the stack he'd brought with him and opened it. He asked about the procedure for dissolving an LLC partnership in Washington state. About how assets would be divided if you and he separated both personally and professionally. About whether your use of the Thompson name professionally would affect ownership claims. About whether sweat equity versus capital contribution affected distribution calculations. Each sentence landed like a stone. Matthew had been planning this thoroughly, talking to lawyers, making sure he understood his options. "When did he ask about dissolution?" I asked. "The first time, about 6 months ago. But he's asked follow-up questions as recently as last month." 6 months. He'd been planning to leave Thompson and Associates to leave me for at least 6 months. Probably longer if you counted the initial conversations with Philip. "Why didn't you tell me?" My voice came out very quiet. Jason looked at me directly. "Because he was my client too. Because I had a duty of confidentiality. Because—" He stopped. Started again. "Because I hoped he'd change his mind. Because I thought maybe he was just exploring options, not actually planning to leave. Because I'm a coward who didn't want to blow up your marriage by revealing something that might have been nothing." "It's not nothing," I said. "I know that now," Jason said. "Julia, I'm sorry. I should have found a way to warn you without violating privilege. I should have pushed Matthew harder to talk to you directly. I should have, I don't know, done something different." I believed him. Jason looked genuinely upset. But it didn't change what had happened. Matthew had been planning his exit for months, and Jason had known, and I'd been operating in ignorance while both of them prepared for a future that didn't include me as Matthew's partner. "I need you to do something for me," I said. "Of course. Anything." "I need a full forensic review of Thompson and Associates' finances. Every account, every transaction, every expense report for the past 2 years at minimum. I need to know if Matthew's taken anything else beyond what I've already found. Used business funds for Pacific Northwest Property Group. Diverted any resources. Anything." "Julia, if you're worried about theft—" "I'm not worried. I'm certain. I just need documentation." I pulled out my phone, opened the photos I'd taken of Matthew's laptop screen, showed Jason the emails, the financial documents, the pitch deck that listed Thompson and Associates as something in Matthew's past. Jason looked through them carefully. His face got progressively grimmer. "He forged your signature on a distribution authorization," Jason said. "Yes." "That's fraud. Serious fraud." "I know." "You could press criminal charges." "I know that too," I said. "But first I need to understand the full scope of what he's done. I need every piece of evidence documented. And Jason?" I met his eyes. "This time you work for me, not for Thompson and Associates, for me personally. Whatever you find, Matthew doesn't get to know about it until I decide what to do with the information. Are we clear?" Jason nodded slowly. "You're my client now, crystal clear. I'll need a recommendation for a forensic accountant too," I said. "Someone who specializes in litigation support. Someone who can present this in court if necessary." "I know someone," Jason said. "Sandra Clark. She's excellent. Thorough, discreet." "Set up a meeting," I said. "As soon as possible. And Jason, if Matthew asks you anything about what I'm working on, you tell him nothing. You cite attorney-client privilege if you need to. But you don't tell him I'm investigating." "Understood," Jason said. I stood up. Jason stood too. "Julia," he said, "for what it's worth, I think Matthew's making a terrible mistake. Thompson and Associates only works because of you. The operations, the client relationships, the financial management, that's all you. He's going to regret leaving." "Maybe," I said. "But he won't regret it because I'm going to make him regret it. He's going to regret it because he committed fraud, and I'm going to document every bit of it and use it against him." I walked out of Jason's office into the gray Seattle morning and stood on the sidewalk, watching people hurry past with coffee cups and briefcases and phones pressed to their ears. All of them going somewhere, doing something, managing their lives. I'd spent 12 years managing my life very carefully, building a business, supporting a husband, being the competent partner. And somehow, without noticing, I'd managed myself right into irrelevance. Matthew didn't need me anymore. Maybe he never had. Maybe I'd been useful, the person who handled the boring operational details while he pursued exciting opportunities. But not actually necessary. Not to him. But Thompson and Associates needed me. The business I'd built, the clients I'd cultivated, the properties I'd managed, that all needed me. And I wasn't going to let Matthew take it. I got in my car and drove to the Thompson and Associates office. We leased space in a small commercial building in Fremont, about 1,500 square feet. 2 private offices, a shared work area, a conference room, a small kitchen, nothing fancy. We'd always prioritize putting money into properties rather than overhead. Lauren Davis was at her desk when I arrived, working through a stack of lease renewals. She looked up and smiled. "Julia, I thought you were sick." "Feeling better," I lied. "Lauren, can I talk to you for a minute? In my office?" She followed me in, looking curious but not worried. I gestured for her to close the door and sit down. "I need to ask you something," I said, "and I need you to be completely honest with me. Has Matthew asked you to do anything unusual recently? Anything that seemed odd or that he asked you to keep confidential?" Lauren's expression shifted, became guarded. "Why are you asking?" "Because I'm trying to understand some financial irregularities, and I need to know if they extend beyond what I've already found." "Am I in trouble?" "No," I said. "Not if you tell me the truth now." Lauren was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "About 3 months ago, Matthew asked me to help him organize some property files. He said he was working on a special project, a potential acquisition in Portland, and he needed background research on comparable properties. He asked me to do it on my personal time, not log the hours, and not mention it to you because he wanted to surprise you with a fully formed proposal. Did you do it?" "Yes. I spent maybe 10 hours researching Portland property values, comp sets, market trends. I thought it was sweet, actually, that he wanted to surprise you with a good opportunity." Sweet. Matthew had enlisted our employees to do work for his secret competing business and framed it as a romantic surprise for me. "Did he pay you for the time?" "He gave me $500 cash. Said it was a bonus for helping with a special project." $500 for 10 hours of work. Below market rate for what Lauren should have charged, but enough that she felt compensated. Smart. Matthew had been very smart about all of this. "What else?" I asked. "That's it," Lauren said. "He never mentioned it again, and I never saw any Portland acquisition proposals in our business files, so I figured the deal fell through and he decided not to pursue it." "The deal didn't fall through," I said. "Matthew started a separate company in Portland without telling me. He used your research to evaluate properties for that company. He lied to you about what he was using it for." Lauren's eyes widened. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. If I'd known." "I know," I said. "That's why I'm not upset with you. Matthew lied to both of us, but I need you to write down everything you remember about the research you did, properties you looked at, analyses you ran, any communications you had with Matthew about it. Can you do that?" "Yes," Lauren said. "Absolutely. Julia, I'm really sorry." "It's not your fault," I said. Matthew's very good at manipulating people. After Lauren left, I sat at my desk and thought about what else I needed to do. Secure the bank accounts, change passwords, make sure Matthew couldn't move any money while I was building my case. I called our bank, Washington Business Bank, where we'd maintained accounts since we'd started Thompson and Associates. Asked to speak with our relationship manager, a woman named Melissa Harris, who'd handled our accounts for years. "Melissa," I said when she came on the line. "This is Julia Thompson from Thompson and Associates. I need to request a temporary freeze on all our business accounts pending an internal audit. An internal audit? Melissa sounded concerned. Is there a problem? Just some irregularities I want to investigate, I said. As primary account holder, I have the authority to request this, correct? Yes, you do. We'll need written confirmation, but I can initiate the freeze immediately. All accounts? All except the operating account for basic business expenses, and I need dual authorization requirements on any withdrawals over $5,000 from the operating account. I can do that, Melissa said. Julia, is everything okay? Do you need any assistance from our fraud department? Not yet, I said. I'll let you know if I do. For now, I just need the accounts frozen. I'll take care of it, Melissa said. You should see the changes reflected in your online banking within an hour. After I hung up, I logged into our business banking portal and changed all the passwords, made them complex, wrote them down in a notebook I kept in my locked desk drawer. Then I called our 5 largest clients, the ones with the most active leases, the ones whose rent payments made up the bulk of our operating revenue, told them we were restructuring our banking and they should hold their next rent payments until they received updated wire instructions from me personally. Is there a problem? Asked one of them. Christopher Ellis, who owned a chain of coffee shops and leased retail space from us in 3 different properties. Just a security upgrade, I said, making sure all our accounts are properly protected. I'll send you the new wire instructions by the end of the week. Okay, Christopher said. Thanks for the heads up. I made similar calls to the other 4 clients. All of them accepted my explanation without question. Why wouldn't they? I'd been their primary contact for years. I was the one who handled their lease issues, coordinated their maintenance requests, processed their rent payments. Matthew barely knew their names. By the time I finished, it was 3 p.m. Matthew would be done with his Tacoma Planning Commission meeting. He'd probably be heading back to the office soon. I needed to not be here when he arrived. I didn't trust myself to act normal around him yet. The knowledge of his betrayal was too fresh, too raw. I'd give something away. I packed up my laptop, told Lauren I was going to work from home for the rest of the day, and left. But I didn't go home. Instead, I drove to a hotel near the airport, checked in under my maiden name, Julia Thompson, not Julia and Matthew Thompson, got a room with a desk and decent Wi-Fi. Then I sat down and started writing, documenting everything I'd found, creating a timeline, building a case. Evidence. Item number 1, text message from Matthew to Catherine referencing Portland expansion that was supposedly shelved. Evidence. Item number 2, Pacific Northwest Property Group. LC formation, documents showing Matthew as 60% owner with $180,000 capital contribution. Evidence, item number 3. Withdrawal records from joint savings account showing $48,000 taken by Matthew over 13 months. Evidence, item number 4. Home equity line draw of $95,000, paid back 2 months later via cash advance on Matthew's personal credit card. Evidence item number 5. Business distribution of $102,000 to Matthew authorized by forged signature. Evidence item number 6. Credit card charges showing travel to Portland, legal fees to Miller, and associates, business meals in Portland. Evidence item number 7. Emails between Matthew and Philip discussing formation of Pacific Northwest Property Group, use of joint funds, decision not to tell me. Evidence. Item number 8. Matthew's browser search history showing research on LLC dissolution and divorce asset division. Evidence. Item number 9. Draft pitch deck using Thompson & Associates success to attract investors to Pacific Northwest Property Group. Evidence item number 10. Lauren Davis's statement about unpaid research work for Portland surprise acquisition. I worked through the evening, ordering room service, building my documentation. Around 8 p.m., my phone rang. Matthew. I let it ring 4 times before answering. Hey, he said. Where are you? I came home and you're not here. Feeling better, so I went into the office for a few hours, I said. Then I decided to grab dinner with Catherine. I'm in Olympia. The lie came easily, smoothly. I'd never been a good liar before, but apparently I was learning. Oh, Matthew said. He sounded surprised. I thought you were sick. I felt better this afternoon, and Catherine really wanted to see me, so I drove down. I'll probably stay over at her place and come back tomorrow. Okay, he said. Tell Catherine I say hi. I will, I said. Love you. Love you too. I hung up and stared at my phone. Then I called Catherine. My sister answered on the second ring. Julia, are you okay? Matthew said you were sick this morning. I'm fine, I said. Catherine, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Has Matthew talked to you about his work recently? About any expansion plans or new projects? A pause. Yes. He mentioned he was exploring some opportunities in Portland. He said it was confidential, that you guys were keeping it quiet for competitive reasons. Was I not supposed to know? The confirmation hurt, even though I'd expected it. When did he tell you this? Maybe a month ago? I'd asked if he was traveling more for work because he seemed stressed when we talked on the phone, and he said they were just looking at a new market. He asked me not to mention it to you yet because it was still preliminary. Her voice shifted, became worried. Julia, what's wrong? Did I do something wrong? You didn't do anything wrong, I said. My throat felt tight. Matthew lied to you. He's been building a separate business in Portland without telling me. He told you it was confidential to make sure you wouldn't mention it if I asked. He used you as a cover. Silence on the line. Catherine? He wouldn't do that. Her voice was small, uncertain. Matthew wouldn't lie to us. There must be some misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding, I said. I have documentation, months of it. He created a company in Oregon with his college roommate, used our joint savings and business funds to finance it. Told you just enough to keep you from questioning why he was acting strange. You thought you were helping him by keeping a business confidence. He knew you'd think that. He counted on it. I heard her breathing on the other end of the line. Then quietly, Julia, I can't believe he would. I know, I said. I didn't believe it either, but it's true. And Catherine, I need you to do something for me. If Matthew calls you in the next few days and asks where I am or what I'm doing, I need you to tell him I'm visiting you. Can you do that? Where are you, actually? At a hotel near the airport, building a legal case against my husband. Another long pause. Then Catherine said, What are you going to do? I don't know yet, I said, which was a lie. I knew exactly what I was going to do. I just wasn't ready to say it out loud. Julia, Catherine said carefully, are you safe? Is Matthew? Has he ever hurt you? Not physically, I said. Just financially and emotionally. But that's enough. Do you want me to come up there? I can drive up tonight. You shouldn't be alone. I'm not alone, I said. I have evidence and documentation and a plan. That's better than company right now. That's not better than company, Catherine said. That's isolation. Maybe she was right. But isolation felt safer than company. Company meant explaining. Company meant sympathy. Company meant the possibility of someone talking me out of what I was about to do. I'll call you tomorrow, I told Catherine. I promise. But right now I need to keep working. We hung up. I sat in the hotel room looking at my documentation and felt the weight of what I was building settle over me. This wasn't just evidence of Matthew's fraud. This was ammunition. A weapon I was forging carefully, methodically, to destroy the partnership he'd already abandoned. Because that's what he'd done. He'd abandoned our partnership months ago when he'd started planning Pacific Northwest Property Group. He'd abandoned it when he'd stolen our joint savings. He'd abandoned it when he'd forged my signature. He'd abandoned it when he'd told Philip I was risk-averse and would slow everything down with analysis. He just hadn't told me yet. Well, I wouldn't tell him what I'd found either. Not yet. Not until I was ready. Not until I had everything documented and secured and prepared. Matthew wanted a clean separation. He'd get one. But on my terms. I worked through the night, refining my documentation. Fell asleep around 3 a.m. with my laptop still open, financial spreadsheets glowing in the dark. The meeting with Sandra Clark happened 3 days later. Sandra was in her mid-50s, dressed in a sharp business suit, with gray hair pulled back in a neat bun. She had the kind of face that looked like it had seen everything twice and wasn't impressed either time. We met in Jason's conference room. Jason had arranged the meeting, but he excused himself after introductions. "This is your attorney-client relationship now," he told me. "I'll be available if you need legal interpretation, but Sandra works for you directly." After he left, Sandra spread her materials across the conference table. "Jason gave me a summary of what you're investigating," she said. "Potential financial fraud by your business partner, who's also your spouse. Forged signatures, unauthorized distributions, misappropriation of joint funds. Is that accurate?" "Yes," I said. "Before we go further, I need to explain my role and my limitations," Sandra said. "I'm a forensic accountant. I analyze financial records, identify irregularities, document evidence of fraud or financial misconduct. I prepare reports that can be used in litigation. What I don't do is give legal advice or strategic guidance on what you should do with the information I find. That's Jason's job. My job is finding the facts. Are you clear on that?" "Yes." "Good. Now, I've reviewed the preliminary documents you provided to Jason, the forged distribution authorization, the withdrawal records, the LLC formation documents for Pacific Northwest Property Group. It's a strong start, but I need access to everything. Business bank accounts, credit card statements, expense reports, tax returns, loan documents, everything for at least the past 2 years, ideally longer." "I can get you everything," I said. "I'm the primary account holder on all our business accounts. I have access to all our financial records." "Does your husband know you're investigating?" "No." "Good, let's keep it that way for now. The last thing we want is him trying to hide assets or create additional complications." Sandra pulled out a laptop and opened a spreadsheet. "I'm going to need to trace every dollar that moved through your business and personal accounts over the past 2 years. It's going to take time, probably 2 to 3 weeks for a preliminary report, longer if I find additional issues that need investigation." "How much is this going to cost?" I asked. "My rate is $350 per hour. Based on what you've described, I'd estimate 60 to 80 hours for a comprehensive forensic review. That's $21,000 to $28,000. I didn't flinch. Thompson and Associates could afford it, and once I had Sandra's report, I'd make sure Matthew paid for it as part of whatever settlement we reached. "Do it," I said. Sandra nodded. "I'll need you to sign an engagement letter and provide me with login credentials for all your financial accounts. I'll also need copies of your partnership agreement, your tax returns, and any other corporate documents that might be relevant." We spent the next hour going through the details. I gave Sandra everything: bank account logins, credit card statements, expense reports Matthew had submitted over the past 2 years, copies of every signed document I could find. Sandra worked through it methodically, making notes, asking clarifying questions, building a picture of Thompson and Associates' financial structure. "Your husband was smart about this," she said eventually. "The amounts are large enough to matter, but small enough to avoid immediate scrutiny. The fake consulting company is sophisticated. Most people wouldn't think to verify that vendors actually exist. The forged signatures are good quality. He put real effort into this." "Does that make it harder to prove?" I asked. "No," Sandra said. "It makes it easier, actually. Sophisticated fraud requires planning. Planning creates documentation. Documentation creates evidence. If he'd just grabbed $100,000 out of the business account and run, it would be obvious, but potentially defensible, as an honest mistake or a misunderstanding about his withdrawal authority. But this? She gestured at the stack of documents. This shows intent, deliberation, pattern, and practice. This is the kind of evidence that holds up very well in court. How long before you have something I can use? I'll start immediately. I should have preliminary findings within a week, a full report within 3 weeks. Sandra closed her laptop and looked at me directly. Julia, I have to ask, what's your goal here? Are you trying to dissolve your partnership, sue for damages, press criminal charges? Your strategy should inform what kind of report I prepare. I want him out of Thompson and Associates completely, I said. I want full ownership. I want him to walk away with nothing. That's an aggressive goal, Sandra said. Your partnership agreement specifies 50-50 ownership. Even with evidence of fraud, you might have difficulty getting a court to award you 100% of business assets. Our partnership agreement has a material breach clause, I said. If either partner engages in fraud or self-dealing that materially harms the business, the other partner can invoke immediate dissolution and claim full ownership as compensation for damages. Sandra's eyebrows rose. That's an unusually strong clause. Most partnership agreements don't go that far. Our lawyer insisted on it when we formed the business, I said. I thought he was being overcautious. Now I think he knew something I didn't. Smart lawyer, Sandra said. If you can invoke that clause, and if my forensic report supports the allegation of material breach, then yes, you could potentially force Matthew out and claim full ownership. But he'll fight it. This won't be clean or easy. I don't need easy, I said. I need documented proof that he committed fraud. Can you give me that? Based on what I've seen so far, Sandra said. Yes, absolutely. I drove back to the hotel where I'd been staying. It had been 3 days since I'd gone home. 3 days of telling Matthew I was staying with Catherine, working from Olympia, too busy to drive back to Seattle. He'd accepted my explanations without question, probably relieved to have the house to himself. I'd talked to him on the phone twice a day, keeping my voice normal, discussing business issues like everything was fine. The Ramirez permits had been approved. One of our Park Avenue tenants had requested an early lease termination. The insurance premium on our Tacoma property was coming up for renewal. Normal conversations, professional conversations, like we were business partners who got along well, nothing more. Maybe that's all we'd ever really been. I lay on the hotel bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the past 12 years, trying to identify when things had changed, when Matthew had stopped seeing me as a true partner and started seeing me as an obstacle to manage. Had it been gradual? A slow drift as our interests diverged and our communication broke down? Or had there been a specific moment, a conversation, a decision, an opportunity, when he'd decided I was more useful than necessary, more managing than supportive? I thought about all the times I'd said no to Matthew's ideas, the expansion opportunities I'd analyzed and rejected because the numbers didn't work, the risky deals I'd pushed back on because we couldn't afford the downside, the aggressive growth plans I'd slowed down because we needed to consolidate first. I'd thought I was being prudent, protective of what we'd built, making sure we grew sustainably rather than recklessly. But from Matthew's perspective, maybe I was just the person who always said no, the person who crushed his ambitions with spreadsheets and risk analyses, the person who kept him small and safe and boring, risk-averse. That's what he'd called me in his email to Philip. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was risk-averse. Maybe I'd been so focused on protecting what we had that I'd stopped being willing to reach for what we could become. Or maybe, probably, Matthew was just rewriting history to justify his betrayal, turning my competence into a flaw, my caution into cowardice. Either way, it was done. He'd made his choice. Now I was making mine. My phone buzzed, a text from Catherine. How are you holding up? I typed back. Fine, I'm working, building my case. Catherine. That's not the same as holding up. Do you want to talk? I stared at the message. Did I want to talk? Did I want to explain to my sister how my husband had spent months methodically stealing from me and planning his exit? How I'd been so busy being competent and reliable that I'd failed to notice I was partnered with someone who saw me as disposable? No, I didn't want to talk about that. Not tonight, I typed. But thank you. Catherine sent back a heart emoji, the kind of simple, inadequate gesture that people make when they don't know what else to do. The forensic review took 18 days. Sandra called me on a Wednesday afternoon. I have preliminary findings. Can you come to Jason's office tomorrow morning? Yes, I said. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in the hotel bed, watching the digital clock count toward morning, thinking about what Sandra might have found. More fraud? Less? Something that would strengthen my case? Or something that would complicate it? I arrived at Jason's office at 9 a.m. Sandra was already there with printed reports, spread across the conference table and her laptop open. Jason came in a minute later carrying coffee. He'd brought me one too, a latte the way I liked it. The small gesture made my throat tight. Thank you, I said. Sandra didn't waste time on pleasantries. I've completed a comprehensive review of Thompson & Associates' financial records for the past 4 years. I went back further than originally discussed because I found patterns that suggested the irregularities started earlier than we thought. Here's what I found. She slid a bound report across the table to me. 53 pages, professionally formatted with tables and charts and highlighted sections. First, Sandra said, the fake consulting company, Strategic Property Advisors. Matthew created it 2 years ago, billed Thompson & Associates $35,000 over 6 months, and pocketed the money. The company was formed in Delaware specifically to obscure ownership, and it was dissolved immediately after the final payment. This is clear, documented fraud. I nodded. I'd known about this one. Second, Sandra continued, travel and business expenses. Over the past 18 months, Matthew submitted approximately $23,000 in reimbursement requests for business development trips, meals, and entertainment. I cross-referenced these with Thompson & Associates' actual business activities. About 60% correspond to legitimate business opportunities. The other 40%, roughly $9,200, were Portland trips and meetings that had nothing to do with Thompson & Associates and everything to do with Pacific Northwest Property Group. So he stole $9,000 in travel costs, I said. Plus an additional $4,300 in meal and entertainment expenses for fake client meetings, Sandra said. I found at least 17 receipts from Portland restaurants that he claimed were Seattle client development, but that I can't match to any actual clients or opportunities. Conservative estimate, $13,500 in fraudulent expense. Reimbursements. Jason was taking notes. His face was grim. Third, Sandra said, the forged distribution authorizations. You found one. I found 5. I went very still. 5? 5 separate instances over the past 2 years where Matthew authorized distributions to himself using a forged version of your signature. The amounts range from $15,000 to $102,000. Total, $267,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. $267,000. Not the $102,000 I'd thought. Nearly 3 times that. How did I not notice? I said. My voice came out strange, distant. Because he was smart about the timing, Sandra said. He scheduled the distributions to coincide with major business expenses, property acquisitions, renovation costs, insurance renewals. Times when you were focused on other large transactions and less likely to scrutinize every line item on the financial statements. And because your business was profitable enough that it kept growing despite the fraud, you were making enough money that, $267,000 spread over 2 years didn't cripple operations. Jesus, Jason said quietly. Fourth, Sandra said, personal withdrawals from your joint accounts. You identified $48,000 from savings. I found an additional $27,000 withdrawn from your joint checking account over the same period. Smaller amounts, more frequent, categorized as household expenses or emergency repairs. Except when I cross-reference them with actual household spending, most of those withdrawals don't correspond to any legitimate expense. I thought about all the times Matthew had said he needed cash for something, a contractor who only accepted cash, an emergency repair that couldn't wait, a good deal on materials that required immediate payment. I'd trusted him. I'd given him access to our accounts. I'd never thought to verify. So in total, Sandra said, I've documented the following misappropriated funds: $35,000 from the fake consulting company, $13,500 from fraudulent expense reimbursements, $267,000 from forged distributions, $75,000 from personal account withdrawals. Total, $390,500. $400,000, rounded. Matthew had stolen $400,000 from me over 2 years. Can we prove all of this? Jason asked. Yes, Sandra said. The documentation is extensive. Bank records, forged signatures that I've had a handwriting expert verify don't match Julia's actual signature style, fake company formation and dissolution records, expense receipts that don't match business activities. This is one of the most well-documented cases of partnership fraud I've worked on. Because Matthew was thorough, I said. He didn't just steal, he created systems for stealing. Exactly, Sandra said. Which makes the evidence stronger. This isn't a one-time mistake or misunderstanding. This is sustained, systematic fraud over multiple years. The room was quiet for a moment, then Jason said, Julia, with this evidence, you could press criminal charges. This is felony theft, forgery, fraud. Matthew could go to prison. What would that accomplish? I asked. Justice? Jason suggested. Justice is expensive, I said. Criminal prosecution takes months, maybe years. During that time, Thompson and Associates would be mired in scandal. Our clients would leave, our reputation would be destroyed, and in the end, Matthew goes to prison, and I'm left with a ruined business and no way to recover what he stole. So what do you want to do? Jason asked. I looked at the report Sandra had prepared. 53 pages of evidence, proof that my husband had systematically stolen from me for years, that he'd planned his exit carefully, that he treated our partnership as a resource to extract rather than a relationship to maintain. I want him out, I said, immediately. I want to invoke the material breach clause in our partnership agreement. I want full ownership of Thompson and Associates, and I want him to walk away quietly with no criminal charges and no public scandal in exchange for not pursuing him for the $390,000 he stole. That's letting him off easy, Jason said. No, I said. That's protecting what I built. Criminal prosecution destroys Thompson and Associates to punish Matthew. This way, I get the business intact, and he loses his ownership stake and his reputation. He doesn't go to prison, but he also doesn't get to claim he's a wronged partner who got pushed out by an unfair spouse. Sandra nodded slowly. It's a pragmatic approach. You're trading his potential criminal liability for clean ownership of the business. Can we make it work legally? I asked Jason. Yes, he said. The material breach clause is clear. With Sandra's evidence, we can easily prove fraud that materially harmed the business. We draft a letter invoking the clause, notify Matthew that you're assuming full ownership, and give him 48 hours to respond. If he fights it, we file for dissolution and present this evidence in court. But if he's smart, and apparently he is, he'll take the deal. Draft the letter, I said. Jason pulled out his laptop and started typing. Sandra packed up her materials. I sat in the conference room looking out the window at Pioneer Square below, watching people go about their Wednesday morning routines. Everything was about to change. Again. After the meeting, I finally went home. The house looked the same expanded windows, same granite countertops, same breakfast nook. But it felt different, foreign, like I was visiting a space I used to live in, but that no longer belonged to me. Matthew's car was in the driveway. He was home, which I hadn't expected. I found him in the home office, working at his desk. He looked up when I came in, smiled. "Hey, you're finally back. How is Catherine?" "Fine," I said. I set my bag down. "We need to talk." Something in my voice made him pause. "Okay, what's up?" "I know about Pacific Northwest Property Group," I said. His face went very carefully blank. "What?" "I know about the company you formed in Portland with Philip Clark. I know you've been using our joint savings to fund it. I know you've been lying to me for months about where you're traveling and what you're working on." Matthew set down his pen. "Julia, I also know about Strategic Property Advisors," I said. "The fake consulting company you created to Bill Thompson and Associates, $35,000 that went straight into your personal account. I know about the forged bonus distributions. I know about the fabricated travel expenses. I know you've stolen nearly $400,000 from our business and our joint accounts over the past 2 years." The color drained from his face. "Stolen is a strong word. What would you call it?" "Managing my compensation appropriately," Matthew said. He stood up, ran a hand through his hair. "Julia, you have to understand. You've been controlling everything about Thompson and Associates for years. Every decision, every expense, every direction. I built that business with you, but you've treated it like it's yours alone. The bonuses I took were compensation I'd earned. The consulting fee was for work I actually did, even if the company structure was unconventional. The revisionism was breathtaking. The casual way he reframed fraud as appropriate compensation, theft as earned income. You forged my signature, I said. 5 times. I knew you'd approve it if I asked, Matthew said. You just never had time to discuss compensation because you were always too busy managing everything else. I needed money for Pacific Northwest Property Group. I'd found a real opportunity. I couldn't wait for you to finish analyzing it to death and decide it was too risky. So you stole money instead. I took what I'd earned from a business I helped build, Matthew said. His voice was rising. You act like Thompson and Associates is all yours. Like I contributed nothing, but I brought in clients, I structured deals, I handled all the financing relationships. That business wouldn't exist without me. The business exists because I do the actual work while you develop relationships, I said. Someone has to manage operations while you're networking. And I'm grateful for that, Matthew said. The placating tone was back, reasonable, understanding. You're incredible at operations. But Julia, we've been growing apart for years. You know that. We're partners in business, but we're barely partners in anything else anymore. When's the last time we had a real conversation that wasn't about cap rates or tenant problems? When's the last time we went on a vacation? When's the last time we talked about anything except work? Don't do that, I said. Don't make this about our marriage, failing naturally. You planned this. You created an exit strategy. You stole money. You built a competing business. You manipulated my sister. You didn't drift away. You systematically prepared to leave. I prepared to survive, Matthew said, because I knew if I tried to leave Thompson and Associates, honestly, you'd fight me for everything. You'd tie me up in litigation for years. You'd use the partnership agreement to prevent me from starting anything new. So yes, I planned. I prepared. I made sure I'd have options. You mean you made sure you could steal enough money to start a competing business before I noticed? Pacific Northwest Property Group doesn't compete with Thompson and Associates, Matthew said. Portland isn't our market. We decided that together. I'm not doing anything illegal. You committed fraud, I said. Documented fraud. I have bank records, forged signatures, expense reports for fake meetings, a fake consulting company, a forensic accountant's report that lays out every dollar you stole, nearly $400,000. Matthew stared at me. You hired a forensic accountant. Yes. You've been investigating me. You've been stealing from me. Jesus Christ, Julia. He ran both hands through his hair. When did you become this person? When I realized my husband had spent years stealing from me and planning his exit, I said, I adapted. If you file that report, Matthew said, if you push the material breach clause, it'll destroy Thompson and Associates. We'll be in litigation for years. Legal fees will drain the business. Our reputation will be ruined. None of our clients will want to stay with us through that kind of mess. You'd rather destroy what we built than share it? You already destroyed it, I said. I'm just documenting the damage. He looked at me for a long moment. I watched him calculate, weighing options. The forensic evidence was solid. Jason had made sure of that. Matthew could fight, but fighting would cost him everything. Money, reputation, potentially his freedom if I decided to press criminal charges. Or he could walk away from Thompson and Associates and keep Pacific Northwest Property Group. Keep his relationship with Philip. Keep his Portland investors who didn't know what he'd done in Seattle. Keep his freedom. What do you want? He asked finally. I pulled the letter from my bag, Jason's carefully crafted letter, printed on law firm stationery, outlining every documented instance of fraud. I handed it to Matthew. He read it slowly. I watched his face change as he processed the evidence. The bank records, the fake company documentation, the forged signatures with dates and amounts, Sandra's expert analysis. When he finished, he looked up at me. You want me to sign over my 50% ownership? Yes, immediately. In exchange, I won't file criminal charges for fraud. I won't sue you for recovery of the stolen funds. I'll let you walk away from Thompson and Associates with nothing, but I won't send you to prison. That's insane, Matthew said. That's generous, I said. The alternative is I file this letter tomorrow with the county prosecutor, initiate dissolution proceedings under the material breach clause, and pursue criminal charges. You'll lose Pacific. Northwest Property Group, too, because you used stolen money to fund it. Philip's investors will disappear when they learn his partner committed felony fraud. Your reputation in commercial real estate will be finished, and you'll probably spend 2 to 5 years in prison. I'd fight this. With what money? I said. I froze all Thompson and Associates accounts. You don't have access to business funds anymore. Your personal savings are tied up in Pacific Northwest Property Group. You'd need to hire an attorney, and attorneys cost money you don't currently have. And even if you found one, you'd lose. The evidence is documented. Multiple witnesses, expert analysis. You committed sustained systematic fraud. No attorney can make that go away. Matthew stared at me. You froze the accounts. I'm the primary holder. I have that right. Jesus Christ, Julia! He set the letter down on his desk. When did you become this person? When I realized my husband had spent years stealing from me and planning his exit, I said. You asked me that already. The answer hasn't changed. I built that business. You helped build it, then you stole from it. Now you're done. He looked at me for a long time. I watched him process what was happening. His carefully planned exit had been interrupted by my more carefully planned evidence gathering. His clean separation had become complicated by documentation of his fraud. He could fight, drag this out, make everything messy and expensive and public. Or he could take the deal I was offering, walk away from Thompson and Associates, keep Pacific Northwest Property Group, keep his freedom, keep whatever reputation he had left. I need to talk to an attorney, he said finally. You have 24 hours, I said. After that, I file the letter with the county prosecutor and initiate dissolution proceedings. Your choice. I left him standing in the home office, our home office, though it wouldn't be ours much longer, and went downstairs. Packed a bag with 2 weeks of clothes, toiletries, laptop, notebooks. Matthew didn't follow me, didn't try to stop me, just stayed in the office, probably staring at Jason's letter, calculating his odds. I walked out to my car, put my bag in the trunk, and drove away from the house with its expanded windows and granite countertops and breakfast nook. The house where I'd spent 12 years building a life with someone who'd been planning his exit the whole time. I didn't look back. The call came 30 hours later. Not from Matthew, but from his attorney, someone named Peter Shaw from a different firm, a firm I didn't recognize. "Ms. Thompson," Shaw said, "I'm calling on behalf of Matthew Thompson. He's prepared to sign the ownership transfer agreement under the following conditions. You agree not to pursue criminal charges, you agree not to sue for recovery of the disputed funds, and you agree not to disparage him to clients or industry contacts." I already agreed to the first two conditions, I said. The third one isn't happening. If people ask me why Matthew left Thompson and Associates, I'm going to tell them the truth. That would constitute defamation if the allegations can't be proven. It's documented fraud, I said. I have a 53-page forensic report, bank records, handwriting analysis, witness statements. Truth is an absolute defense against defamation. Tell Matthew if he wants the deal, these are the terms. He signs over full ownership to me. I don't press charges or sue for recovery, and he gets to keep whatever reputation he has left. But I'm not lying for him. A pause. I'll relay that to my client. You have until 5 p.m., I said. After that, I file with the prosecutor. Shaw called back at 4:42 p.m. My client accepts your terms. The signing happened in Jason's office 3 days later. Matthew sat across the table from me, his attorney beside him. He looked older than he had 2 weeks ago, tired, like he'd aged 5 years and a handful of days. Jason had prepared the documents, the ownership transfer agreement giving me 100% of Thompson and Associates, the release of liability protecting Matthew from criminal prosecution, the non-disclosure agreement preventing him from sharing proprietary Thompson and Associates information with Pacific Northwest Property Group or any future ventures. Matthew signed everything without speaking. His hand was steady. Mine was steadier. When it was done, Jason notarized the documents and made copies. Matthew stood up. "I hope this was worth it," he said to me. "It was," I said. He looked at me for another moment, like he was waiting for something. Regret, maybe. Apology. Some sign that I was conflicted about what I'd done. He didn't get it. "Goodbye, Matthew," I said. He left without another word. Jason looked at me across the table. "Are you all right?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "For what it's worth," Jason said, "I think you did the right thing. The legal thing anyway. Whether it was the right thing for you personally, that's something you'll have to figure out over time. But not the forgiving thing," I said. "Forgiveness is optional," Jason said. "Protection isn't. You protected yourself and your business. That matters more." I took the documents back to Thompson and Associates' office, my office now, mine alone, and filed them in the safe. Then I sat at my desk and looked around at the space Matthew and I had shared for 9 years. His desk was still there, still covered with his things, a coffee mug, a stack of property listings, a framed photo of the two of us from our wedding day, young and happy and stupidly optimistic about the future we were building together. I packed it all into a box, called a courier service to deliver it to the apartment address Matthew had listed with his attorney. An address in Seattle I didn't recognize. Not our house. He'd already moved out, apparently. Already started the next chapter while I was still processing the end of this one. Fine. Let him start over. I had work to do. The house was next. Our house, which was actually my house. Purchased before the marriage with my down payment, my name alone on the deed. Washington was a community property state, which meant Matthew had a claim to the appreciation in value during our marriage, but the house itself was mine. I called a locksmith, changed the locks, packed the rest of Matthew's belongings, clothes, books, personal items, and had them delivered to his apartment. Then I called Catherine. He signed the agreement, I told her. Thompson and Associates is mine. Matthew's out. How are you? She asked. Angry, I said. Exhausted. Weirdly relieved. Do you want me to come stay with you? Not yet, I said. I need to figure out what comes next first. What came next was work. I spent the next 2 months rebuilding Thompson and Associates operations without Matthew. I reassured clients personally, called each one, explained that Matthew and I had dissolved our partnership due to strategic differences, that Thompson and Associates would continue operations as normal under my sole ownership. Most of them were understanding. A few asked pointed questions about what strategic differences meant. I told them the truth. Matthew engaged in financial practices that I couldn't support. We separated to protect the integrity of the business. Word spread quickly through the industry. I got calls from other property owners, other investors, people I'd met at conferences or industry events over the years. Some expressed sympathy. Some asked if I needed anything. Some just wanted to know the gossip. I gave them all the same response. Brief, professional, focused on moving forward rather than dwelling on what had happened. I hired a new business development associate. Lauren Davis got promoted to that role. She'd proven herself capable and trustworthy, and she was hungry to learn. Are you sure? Lauren asked when I offered her the position. I don't have Matthew's experience. You don't have Matthew's habits either, I said. That's more important. Lauren was nothing like Matthew. She was careful where he'd been ambitious, detail-oriented where he'd been visionary. She asked questions about why we did things certain ways instead of assuming she knew better. She showed up early and stayed late, and never once submitted an expense report for a client meeting that didn't happen. I taught her everything I knew. Not because I trusted her completely. I wasn't sure I'd ever trust a partner completely again, but because Thompson and Associates needed to grow and I couldn't do it alone. We closed 2 new property acquisitions that quarter. Small deals, but solid. The kind of careful growth I'd always pushed for. The kind Matthew had called risk-averse. Matthew's name came up sometimes, in industry meetings or client conversations. People asked where he'd gone, what he was doing now. I told them the truth. Matthew and I dissolved our partnership. He's pursuing other opportunities in Portland. Some people pushed for details. I gave them just enough. We had fundamental disagreements about business practices. It was time to separate. A few people figured out what that meant. A few people called to quietly tell me they'd had their own concerns about Matthew. Expenses that seemed high, meetings that seemed unproductive, a pattern of promising more than he delivered. I listened to all of it. Thanked them for sharing. Didn't ask why none of them had mentioned it while Matthew and I were still partners, because I knew why. The same reason I'd ignored the signs for so long. Matthew was charming, confident, persuasive. He made people believe in the vision even when the execution was messy. And I'd been the one handling the mess, so everyone assumed it was working. 3 months after Matthew signed the ownership transfer, I got a call from Philip Clark. Julia, he said, I don't know if you remember me. I remember you, I said. You're Matthew's partner in Pacific Northwest Property Group. Was his partner, Philip said. Past tense. I sat up straighter. What happened? I found out he lied to me about where his investment capital came from, Philip said. He told me he had personal savings from years of profit distributions from Thompson and Associates. But when I started digging, because our accounting wasn't adding up and I was getting suspicious, I discovered the profit distributions weren't authorized by you. They were forgeries. And then I heard through the industry grapevine that you two had a messy split over business practices, and I started putting pieces together. So you dissolved the partnership, I said. I gave him the same choice you did, apparently, Philip said. Walk away voluntarily or get dragged through litigation for fraud. He walked, signed over his ownership stake last week. How much did he steal from you? About $80,000 that I can document. Inflated expense reports, fake vendor payments, the same tricks he pulled on you. Just smaller scale because we hadn't been operating as long. I'm sorry, I said, and I meant it. Philip had been taken in by Matthew the same way I had. I'm sorry, too, Philip said. For my part in this, I should have done more due diligence before going into business with him. I should have verified his claims about his capital. I shouldn't have just trusted him because he was my college friend. Matthew's very good at making people trust him, I said. Not anymore, Philip said. Word's getting around Portland about what happened. His reputation is finished here. We talked for a few more minutes, sharing war stories about Matthew's fraud, finding a strange comfort in mutual recognition of how thoroughly we'd been manipulated. After I hung up, I sat at my desk and thought about Matthew, about where he was now, what he was doing. He'd lost Thompson & Associates, lost Pacific Northwest Property Group, lost his reputation in both Seattle and Portland. He still had his freedom. I'd given him that by not pressing criminal charges, but everything else was gone. Part of me felt satisfaction at that. The part that was still angry, still hurt by the betrayal, still processing the reality that I'd spent 12 years married to someone who'd seen me as a resource to extract rather than a partner to cherish. But another part, a smaller, quieter part, felt something closer to sadness. Not for Matthew, for the future we'd planned together, for the version of us that had existed before I'd learned the truth, for the person I'd been when I'd still believed our partnership was real. That person was gone. I'd burned her away with evidence and documentation and strategic planning. The person who remained was colder, more careful, more suspicious, but also more protected. I'd learned an expensive lesson about trust, about the difference between partnership and performance, about the ways people could smile at you over breakfast while planning their exit. I wouldn't make that mistake again. 6 months after Matthew signed the ownership transfer, Thompson & Associates was stable. Not thriving yet, we'd lost momentum during the transition, and rebuilding trust with clients took time, but stable. We had good properties, good tenants, consistent cash flow. Lauren had proven herself invaluable. She'd brought in 3 new clients and identified 5 acquisition opportunities that we were analyzing. She worked with the intensity of someone who understood that trust was earned through competence and consistency. I gave her a 20% ownership stake in the company, not because I had to, but because I'd learned something from my partnership with Matthew. You can't build a real business on extraction and control. You build it on shared investment and genuine partnership. Are you sure? Lauren asked when I presented the revised operating agreement. Yes, I said. But Lauren, I'm also putting very clear material breach clauses in the agreement. Clearer than the ones in my agreement with Matthew. And I control the bank accounts, and we're doing quarterly forensic reviews. And if you ever forge my signature, create a fake consulting company, or steal from this business in any way, I will absolutely destroy you. Lauren laughed. Then she saw my face and stopped laughing. You're serious. Completely. Okay then, she said. She signed the agreement without hesitation. I won't steal from you, I promise. Good, I said. Because I'm very good at forensic investigations now. Catherine visited that month. We went to dinner at a restaurant with exposed brick and craft cocktails, the kind of place Matthew had always preferred. How are you, really? Catherine asked after we'd ordered. I don't know, I said. Some days I'm fine. Some days I'm so angry I can barely function. Some days I'm just sad about all the time I wasted, believing in someone who was planning to leave. You didn't waste it, Catherine said. You built a business. That's not nothing. I built it with a liar. You built it despite a liar, Catherine corrected. Julia, everything good about Thompson & Associates was you. The operations, the client relationships, the financial management, that was all you. Matthew helped share, but you were the one who made it work. You were the one who kept it running while he was chasing glamorous opportunities. And now you own it entirely and he's stuck in, wherever he is, with nothing. That's not nothing either. I thought about that. About Matthew, wherever he was now. Portland had rejected him. Seattle's commercial real estate community knew what he'd done. His reputation was ruined in both markets. He still had his freedom, still had whatever money he'd managed to keep. But his career in commercial real estate was effectively over. "Do you ever hear from him?" Catherine asked. "No," I said. "His attorney contacts Jason if there's anything legal that needs to be resolved, but Matthew and I don't speak." "Do you want to?" I thought about that, about whether there was anything left to say, any confrontation or closure that would make this feel resolved. "No," I said finally. "I don't want to hear him explain why he did it, or apologize, or tell me his version of how our marriage fell apart. I know what happened. I have the documentation. I don't need his narrative." "That's very healthy," Catherine said. "Or very cold." "Maybe both," I said. Catherine smiled. "Yeah, maybe both." That night, after Catherine had gone to the guest room in my house, the house that was finally completely mine, I sat in my home office. Matthew's desk was gone. I'd sold it along with his chair and his filing cabinet. The space was mine now. Clean, simple, mine. I pulled up Thompson and Associates' financial statements, reviewed our quarterly numbers, calculated our growth trajectory for the next 3 years. Without Matthew's fraudulent expenses and distributions, our profit margins were better than I'd realized. We'd been making money for years. Real money. I just hadn't seen it because Matthew had been siphoning it off systematically. I thought about the alternative universe where I'd never found that text message on the tablet, where I'd stayed oblivious while Matthew built Pacific Northwest Property Group and eventually presented me with dissolution papers and a lowball buyout offer, where I'd spent years in litigation, burning money on legal fees, fighting for half of something I'd built almost entirely alone. In that universe, Matthew would have gotten away with it. He'd have his Portland company and whatever settlement he could extract from Thompson and Associates, and maybe even sympathy from industry contacts who thought I was the difficult partner, the controlling one, the risk-averse one who'd held him back. But that's not what happened. Because I'd found the message. Because I'd investigated quietly instead of confronting immediately. Because I'd documented everything systematically. Because I'd been willing to burn it all down rather than let Matthew define the terms of separation. Because I'd stopped being the competent partner who managed everything and started being the strategic partner who protected herself. I closed the financial statements and opened a new document. Subject line: Note to self, 6 months later. I wrote for an hour. Everything I'd learned about trust and partnership and the difference between being competent and being complicit. About the ways I'd enabled Matthew's behavior by being so focused on keeping things running smoothly that I'd never questioned whether he was contributing equally or extracting systematically. About the price of being the reliable one, the one who handles everything, the one everyone depends on. How that reliability can become invisibility. How that dependability can become exploitation. I wrote about anger, how it had felt like clarity instead of emotion, how it had driven me to do things I'd never imagined, freezing accounts, hiring forensic investigators, threatening criminal prosecution, how it had probably saved me. And I wrote about the future, about Thompson and Associates growing without Matthew, about Lauren proving herself trustworthy, about clients staying with us because they valued what I'd built, not what Matthew had performed, about the possibility that I might be okay. Eventually, I saved the document, dated it, filed it away. Then I shut down my computer and went to bed in the house that was mine, in the bedroom I'd repainted after Matthew left, in the silence that felt like peace instead of loneliness. I didn't know if I'd ever fully trust another partner. I didn't know if Thompson and Associates would grow into the empire I'd once imagined. I didn't know if I'd eventually stop checking every expense report with forensic intensity, or if I'd carry this vigilance forever. But I knew Matthew Thompson was gone from my business and my home and my life. And I knew that when I'd been forced to choose between accepting his betrayal or fighting back, I'd chosen to fight. I'd chosen to protect what I'd built, to document the theft systematically, to use every legal tool available to remove him from power, to refuse the narrative that his ambition was legitimate while my caution was suffocating. I'd chosen not to forgive, not to accept, not to move on gracefully, not to be the bigger person. I'd chosen to be impossible to ignore, and I'd won, not cleanly, not without cost, not without losing the relationship I'd built my adult life around, but I'd won. Thompson and Associates was mine now, wholly, legally, undeniably mine, and Matthew Thompson, wherever he was, whatever he was building, whoever he was lying to now, would never take that from me again. I turned off the light, the house settled around me in the dark, and I slept.